Jim's first curiosity was if a thing could indeed inflict, for a delver deep in pain it would seem was him. He was a catalyst the day he sucked God's air and the holy warned, for they knew. There was something wrong with Jim. As a babe, he terrorized his mother's breast as like a vampire bat. He did suck and most savage cling. His cradle coo was like the head of Medusa's hiss, and mother knew the day she dropped him. There was something wrong with Jim. For he loved fairy tales of bone-munching cannibals living on islands of fire, poaching heads and toasting fingers far away. He had a treasure trove of nail clippings and hair cuttings, all tools and odds and bods of voodoo that Jim would love to play. He terrorized his biscuit tin troop of soldiers as his play became the fantasy of mean. He learned to pinch and twist like pliers, and he knew to defile what is cherished is the quickest way to find a scream. He peeled his worms like others peeled bananas, for bananas did not wiggle enough for Jim. He terrorized his dolly-playing sister, putting with his vial down her back and frightening her out of hair and skin. And his heroes became history's great axe murderers, as Jim became an unimagined sick grotesque in mind, for Jim loved young, chopping up toxic creatures, sneaking bits in the family food and sniggering as they dined. He grew an annoying habit of dislodging other people's eyeballs and viewing them as cuts of meat. He loved skin that happened upon boiling water, and he had a macabre fascination with knocking nails in feet. As a child, he adorned himself in cobwebs and ketchup to catapult Granny out of her wits, that is to say. He loved it when she swallowed her dentures, and poor Granny knew he'd be a death of me someday. For he loved flattening thumbs with claw hammers, for he was a mind to live to be a ghoul inclined. Household pets were impaled in seconds, and the day Granny choked on glass, she begged the Lord to strike him blind. For he craves to be the howl upon the moon, indeed the creep that crawls right through your skin. He heckles up the backs of dogs, for even dumb creatures knew, oh, there is something wrong with Jim. Then he found a deep romance in cinematic murder, a taint of desire and a tomb of love for him shall be. He plucks his idols from the great impalers and tentacle-clawed monsters that can sever heads beneath the sea. Then Jim took on this smell of turpentine and sulphur, and all felt eradication or combustion near him, for he strives to be a grand composer of epitaphs, and if ghosts could talk, they would tell, ooh, there is something wrong with Jim. But Ma and Pa were always godly things, always washing feet and saying prayers divine. But Jim thought the Lord God spoilt all the fun, so from young he gave his soul to devils and their kind, and his mother sobbed, he has lost the cross in Jesus. For God cannot see to know where to begin, for he is cold as death but hot as hell. And I'm sure if God could find him, he'd send a flood to drown old Jim. For he got aroused when psychos pounced in showers, for he is a twitchy sort of jack-in-the-box inclined. Jim became that constant scratching just beyond the dark, the rat-a-tat-tat that knocks and steps into the mind. For he is held and guided by eyes in mirrors. He is the cornered cobweb child best served dark, for he finds premature detonations funny, and any mishap concerning tragedy or fatality he deemed the greatest lark, and then he trained his hands to twist in knots and became a sculptor of necks entwined. For purple and blue shall be his masterpiece, for death is fantasy and art and terror becomes entwined. For he is the creep, the spine of needles, the tread, the neck, the ice touch of a whisper behind you can never see. He is that peek-a-boo that scares you sick, that final shove that will indeed be the death of thee. And as he grew, he desired to emulate the great snatcher's use of ploy, a hook of loneliness to drown you in his eye, for he craves to make you a precious thing in holes, and sit and watch and count your tears as you cry. For he desires to keep a petite thing to play the mouse, for he's the cat, a toy, the ball of wool inclined. He loved to find the ultimate image, the most gorgeous limp that he could bind, but would still love in nature blind. And he would bed you sound asleep in poison, and tuck you in with razor blades as is his way, and make a heartfelt fantasy of your death, and hatchet you up, so in bits with him you'd always stay. And death fell into his arms like a true romance, as purely clean as marble, as lifeless and pale as milk, a great opal of that look that would never fade, a skin that gave to his sense an ice-cold gift of silk. And whiskey mean, he now beholds his savage god, now a digger of graves, a mighty keeper of heads is he. For now his presence is never sought or just inflicted, for he can no longer disguise this monster he seems to be. And life becomes pennies or tuppence to Jim, worth a stone or grub, that is to say, and squashed and ground all life to be turned to dust, lost to the wind, and forever blown away. And he killed by the barrel load, for the drive of man's lust is an endless gnawing feed, for where some collect stamps or watches, for Jim it was the severed head that drove his collective greed. But why could good heroes not see or catch it? But I suppose he was no lump of dragon large, not him. I mean, there was no placard upon his head to warn the world, for God's sake, run, there's something wrong with Jim. And fearless became the trade of his killer. But complacency, they say, can blunt the blade of sly, and the hooters of law did sniff around and hound it, all now eager to turn up the heat and indeed see this monster fry. Then one day, in a joy of whistles, Jim was a-slashing, missing the sun that did pounce upon the night, and the light revealed the pits and guile of the beast, and proud mothers with nurturing charms did woe and wail the sight. And then they saw him elbow deep in teeth and eyes, caught with red blood, hands up to his chin. Look at the law! He's covered in murder! And now all speculation knew for sure there was something wrong with Jim. And the Lord of Man said, "Yeah, well, I knew him. He did seem an odd Jim in ways inclined. I mean to say, we knew he loved his flicks of slash. But the roar of a chainsaw we deemed to be a woodsman or his kind." And his mother sobbed, "How did this thing sprout out of me, this stinking rotten Jim, this is to say, for I shall forever feel his claws inside me." But the people pelted her with stones and wondered with what monster did she lay. "It is a head that will impact well with closed windows, for he is a beast who bites off babies' heads, or so the judge could tell. And I must now muster all the gospel of my Bible, and damn this abomination straight to flame and hell. And the jury screamed, he robs mothers of two eyes, they pride and joy in what should be. He is a foulness that wrenches stomachs empty, so drown the bugger in a bucket and toss him out to sea. Better still, a good gassing in an electric chair, to crisp and black and side inclined, or deep fry him fritter style, tip him up and toss him down to where the devil dines. And the hand that held the hood offered Jesus once more mercy, for we drop you dead, that is to say. But monsters have no kin in heaven, so he spat the cross and turned his head away. And the Lord imposed a mighty grinding of infliction, a great squeeze at it pop his eyes like plums, and all cheered heartily as he roasted, all men now convinced they had killed one of the devil's sons. And they say Jim's grave frenzied in a slither of worms and echoed in howls, and no holy lip divine would melody, psalm or hymn. And the last spoke words were, damn him dead, for no priest would dare to pray. Oh, please, Lord, forgive our Jim. And in a graveyard stands an ugly slab of brick with no thought or eye for what lies within. For there is no epitaph of lovely boy or sadly missed. There is just this, I told you so. There was something wrong with Jim.